Today we are going to be talking about some brutally honest truths that I wish I had known before starting surfing. Not that they would have necessarily changed me wanting to surf, but I think it would have helped me in a lot of ways to have known them in advance and saved a lot of suffering over worrying or not making progress. So let's get into the video. So the first one is that you might not be as fit as you think you are, or you might not be surf fit. For me, this was a big one and caused a lot of difficulty in learning how to surf because I just didn't have the muscle mass in the areas that you need for surfing because they weren't muscle groups I was typically using in my day-to-day life. I did do some workouts here and there and walking and general activity, but surfing requires a lot of strength from very particular muscle groups, and so practicing popping up or practicing movements that create that repetition and that build up the muscle are really helpful and super important in helping you ultimately progress your surfing, especially as a beginner, because you're not able to have as much experience catching waves and naturally building up that muscle mass the more you surf. The second one is one that is close to my heart, and that is that progress happens where you are outside of your comfort zone. You're not going to make progress if you're constantly just out in waves or water or settings that you feel comfortable in. For example, as a beginner, the best place to be as a beginner is in the whitewash, but if you continue to just stay in the whitewash, you're never going to actually progress to eventually catching green waves. And so you're always having to push that boundary of comfortability and try to, gently and with small baby steps overcome that fear of the water or bigger waves or whatever it is that is holding you back. And it's when we take those little baby steps towards overcoming that fear that we really make a lot of progress. And I'm not saying, obviously, to put yourself in dangerous situations because that won't help you, that'll make it worse. But you always want to be trying to kind of push yourself to a little step each time to try to push that comfort zone. And once you're at a point where you feel like 80% comfortable in that scenario or setting, then you can move on to the next growth step on the staircase of or ladder of making growth in your surfing progress. And understanding that really helped me a lot to just finally get out of being so fearful and afraid of what I felt like were bigger waves or faster or more intense waves. And that brings me to number 3, which is that you're going to have to take a slight beating at times just to be able to push that level of comfortability, either taking off on a wave or paddling out on a day that's a little bigger than you're like super comfortable with. Because for me lately, I've definitely been, getting thrown around a lot more. And it's been really helping me not be so nervous in waves that I know I can handle, but I kind of psych myself out about it and make it out to seem more intense or scary than I know it actually is. And so that's another way that really would have helped me early on to understand that I just really need to kind of push myself out of my comfort zone if I actually want to make progress ever. The fourth one is a little bit more about giving yourself grace when you make mistakes, because it's inevitable no matter how much you practice or you understand surf etiquette that you're at some point probably going to cut someone off and you're probably going to miss a wave that someone told you to take instead of them. And that has definitely happened to me. And it's not great, you try to avoid those scenarios happening, but it's just important to know that it's going to happen and it's okay to have that happen every once in a while, because that's just part of, making mistakes and learning and growing from making mistakes. And that is something I've really struggled with, is making mistakes in my surfing and giving myself the grace to know that that's normal and okay, and I can learn from that experience and not do that next time, or, communicate better so that doesn't happen. The fifth one for me was kind of close to home because where I often tend to surf usually has better waves than some of the other local spots around me. And so there's a lot of people that can surf very well that often surf there. And for me, I was kind of intimidated, being a beginner and even now being more of an advanced beginner surfer in paddling out in surf that, is not not too big for my skill level, but I can just tell the people around me know a lot more about what they're doing. And that made me feel very much like the other surfers were being standoffish. But I've been very pleasantly wrong about, the attitude of some of the other surfers around me. And you do have people that are, territorial or kind of more aggressive personalities. But there are a good amount of surfers that are genuinely encouraging and, friendly to other surfers who are respectful and, know the rules of the road and, aren't making silly mistakes that could put someone else in danger or get hurt. And I've just noticed that it's actually a lot more friendly than my first impressions were of the surfing community, and that there is just a lot more camaraderie, and it's okay to say hi to someone in the morning and they may or may not be friendly back. But I do think more often than not people tend to be pretty friendly, which was something, again, that was really difficult for me to overcome because I was so afraid of like what people would think of me or, judge my surfing and, feel like, who am I to be out here? But I don't think that that is the majority view of a lot of surfers out in the water, especially if you're not doing, the forbidden rules of cutting someone off or getting in their way on a wave or, just basically being a respectful and conscious person out in the water. People tend to be pretty friendly and nice. The next one is something that I've definitely been feeling a lot lately. Finally, after 2 years of surfing, a lot of things have been really clicking for me the last few months, and I've really been catching a lot more waves no matter the conditions. And when things start to click, you've been warned that it really is all you want to do. You're constantly trying to figure out how you can sneak in a session when you feel like the waves might be good for your skill level, or you're putting off, doing stuff like the dishes or trying to cancel plans because you just want to try to get in the water when you know the waves will be good for you. And so you have been warned that when things start clicking and you really are able to start catching more waves and, accommodate for different conditions, that it is addicting. The next brutal truth that I feel like can be a hang up for you to kind of want to quit surfing is that there's often these like highs and lows and seasons with surfing where, 1 week or a couple weeks you might be just having great sessions and the waves are perfect for your skill level and you're making a lot of progress and growing and it seems like you're doing really well with your surfing. And then you might have a couple months where all of a sudden it feels like you can't catch anything and you almost feel like you're regressing and not doing as well as you had been. And that is definitely a roadblock that you have to kind of constantly overcome and understand that maybe things are outside of your control, such as the wave conditions or the beach, that, what the way that the waves are breaking is, maybe not the best for the surf, or, there's just a lot of factors that can be affecting that. And so understanding that, like, just because you might not be having some good sessions doesn't mean you have to throw the whole thing out. And I've definitely been in that camp before where it's like, why am I doing this? There's no point. But it's just how it goes, and that's just how life is often, where there's ups and downs and you have to push through the difficult things. And just understanding that, eventually there will be a session where, the waves will be just, right for you or good for you to find, how to grow or, how to surf differently, popping up faster or whatever it is. And, it's kind of how the whole thing works. And you kind of have to push through those more difficult moments and really hold on to the really fun and positive experiences that you do have in surfing. And like I said, I definitely, have had some lows with surfing and kind of felt like maybe I was forcing something that wasn't meant to be. But I really do love surfing, and it's really been an amazing opportunity for me to grow, not just, in my surfing, but physically, become stronger mentally, and just throughout my life in other areas. It's been so helpful for me. And so it's, just building that resilience of not giving up and continuing to push through and try to figure out what's going wrong and what you can do differently. And I think that is such a beautiful part of surfing, is that you're constantly, no matter how good you are constantly having to learn how to adjust or accommodate depending on the wave conditions. And there's always a challenge for you to try to overcome. The last one is more specifically for beginners, because I've definitely observed beginners paddling out with the wrong board. Speaking as a beginner, the coolest surfboard that you can have is the surfboard that you're going to catch the most amount of waves with, because more waves means more practice means more learning, and more learning means learning how to better surf. So the more waves that you can catch with whatever board you're paddling out with, the better. And that is why often it is recommended for beginners to start off with a foam board or something with lots of liters or volume in it, because you need that extra help to be able to practice the things that you will try to do on a wave on that board. If you don't have enough ability to float and stay on the wave, you're not actually going to be able to practice those fundamental basics that really can only be ultimately practiced in the water, whether it's wave reading or catching the wave or the timing of popping up and riding the wave or turning. The only way you can really practice those is on a surfboard and in the water. So the best thing for beginners is to find a board that you can actually catch waves on, and that goes back to, your physical strength. People that ride shorter boards usually have more strength or better timing and catching the wave, so that they can actually ride it. So all that to say, please, 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 if you are a beginner interested in surfing and watching this video, do not go out and buy a shortboard. The best thing for you is either to get a Wavestorm or a Jerry Lopez or some kind of longboard that has lots of liters and volume and thickness. It's wide and long, to be able to actually make sure you have the best experience with surfing and don't give up on it before you actually have the chance to experience the joy of riding a amazing long wave. That wraps up so far the brutal truths that I have learned about surfing. I will probably do a second video as I continue to learn about surfing and progress myself, but I hope these tips were helpful for you and gave you maybe some insight that would have been helpful for me when I was first learning, and they can help you to be able to progress and grow and be able to surf better. Thank you so much for watching. If you like these tip videos or just seeing little glimpses of my life in San Diego, be sure to subscribe down below. I try to post as often as I can. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you watching this video. I hope you have an awesome day and stay stoked.